She was sitting at a bus stop at midnight, holding her 5-year-old daughter against her chest, with a split lip and a plastic bag that held everything they owned. No money, no phone, no one coming to help. And the little girl looked up at her mother and whispered something that would have broken anyone who heard it. "We have nowhere to go, Mama. If we go back home, he'll hit you again." But someone did hear it. A man standing in the shadows. A man whose name made powerful people go quiet. And he looked at that woman and that child, and he said 3 words that changed their lives forever. "You do now." The snow fell in thin, bitter sheets across the empty streets of South Chicago, the kind of cold that didn't just touch skin, but crawled underneath it. The bus shelter at the corner of Halsted and 43rd had no walls on 3 sides, just a bent aluminum roof and a cracked plastic bench that had long stopped offering comfort to anyone. It was 11 minutes past midnight. The last bus had come and gone 40 minutes ago. Anya Resnick sat on that bench, with her arms wrapped around a 5-year-old girl pressed tightly into the center of her chest. She wore a thin, denim jacket that had been enough for September, but was useless now in the jaw of a late November freeze. Her daughter, Lena, wore 2 layers beneath a child's coat that was 1 size too small. The zipper didn't close all the way. Neither of them wore gloves. Anya's lip was split. Not badly, but enough that the dried blood pulled when she opened her mouth to breathe. There was a bruise forming beneath her left eye that she hadn't yet seen in a mirror. She didn't need a mirror. She knew exactly what shape it would take. She had worn this same bruise in different shades for the past 3 years. In her right hand, she held a plastic grocery bag. Inside it, 2 changes of underwear for the girl, a folded birth certificate, a phone charger, $47 in crumpled bills, and a box of animal crackers she had grabbed from the kitchen counter on her way out. That was everything. That was their entire life now, reduced to what she could carry in one hand while holding her daughter with the other. Lena's face was buried in her mother's neck. Her small body trembled. Not from crying, not anymore, just from cold and the kind of exhaustion that comes after a child has been too scared to sleep. Her fingers were curled into the collar of Anya's jacket, holding on with the quiet desperation of someone who had already learned that the world could take things away without warning. Anya whispered into the top of Lena's head, "We're okay. We're going to be okay." But Lena pulled her face back just enough to look up at her mother. Her eyes were dark brown and enormous and too old for her face. She studied her mother's split lip. She studied the bruise. And then she whispered the words that would change everything. "We have nowhere to go, Mama. If we go back home, he'll hit you again." The words left the little girl's mouth like a prayer said in a church that had already been abandoned. Quiet. Certain. Without a single ounce of hope behind them. She wasn't asking a question. She was stating a fact. 5 years old, and she already understood that home was the most dangerous place they had ever known. Anya closed her eyes and pulled her daughter back against her chest. She had no answer. Because Lena was right. There was nowhere to go. Anya had no family in this country. Her mother was dead. Her father was in Chernivtsi, in a flat he could barely afford, too old and too sick to send anything more than a phone call on birthdays. She had no friends in Chicago. Craig had made sure of that. One by one, over the course of their marriage, he had cut away every connection she had tried to build. The women at church. The neighbor who had invited her for coffee. The Ukrainian grocery clerk who had once given Lena a free candy bar. All of them had been erased from Anya's life through Craig's jealousy, his rules, his punishments for what he called running your mouth to strangers. She had married Craig Belmore 4 years ago, in a courthouse ceremony with no guests. She had come to the United States on a K-1 visa. Craig had seemed kind at first, gentle even. He had written her letters. He had sent pictures of the apartment in Chicago and told her it was a good neighborhood, safe for children. He had told her he wanted to build a life together, and for 8 weeks after the wedding she had believed it. Then the door started closing. First, it was small things. Comments about how she cooked, complaints about her accent, mockery in front of his friends. Then the yelling began. Then the grabbing. Then the first time he hit her, an open palm across the face because she had spoken to a man at the grocery store who had asked her where the bread aisle was. That was 3 years ago. Tonight was the worst it had ever been. Craig had come home drunk and furious about something at work. He had thrown a plate. He had grabbed Anya by the hair and slammed her shoulder into the kitchen doorframe. When Lena started crying, he told the girl to shut up or he would give her something to really cry about. That was when Anya made the decision. Not for herself. She had endured it for herself many times before, but the moment Craig turned his voice toward Lena, something inside Anya cracked open, and she found the kind of courage that only comes when you have nothing left to protect except another person's life. She waited until he passed out on the couch. Then she packed the bag, picked up her daughter, and walked out into the cold. That had been 4 hours ago. Now they sat at a bus stop with nowhere to go, and the only sound in the world was the hiss of snow meeting pavement. Across the street, parked beneath the broken amber glow of a streetlight, a black sedan sat with its engine running. The exhaust rose in soft white plumes. The windows were tinted so dark that no one passing by could have seen the man sitting alone in the back seat. Boris Davidson didn't usually ride through this part of the city at midnight. His world existed in a different geography. The private dining rooms of downtown steakhouses, the top floors of buildings whose tenants paid their rent in silence, the back offices of men who ran unions and construction firms, and the kinds of businesses that operated in the space between legal and something else entirely. Boris was 33 years old. He wore a charcoal overcoat and a black turtleneck and shoes. That cost more than most people's monthly rent. He had dark hair, cut short, and gray eyes that rarely blinked when someone was speaking to him. He was not tall, but he occupied space the way certain men do, completely, without apology, and in a way that made other men instinctively step back. His driver, a broad-shouldered man named Oleg, had taken a wrong turn off the expressway due to a construction detour. That wrong turn had brought them through a neighborhood Boris hadn't seen in years. And as the car rolled slowly past the bus stop, Boris looked through the tinted glass and saw the woman and the child. He almost looked away. He had no business here. He had a meeting in 40 minutes with a man who owed him a significant amount of money, and Boris did not like to be late. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the way the woman was sitting, not like someone waiting for a bus, but like someone who had simply stopped moving because there was nowhere left to go. Or maybe it was the child, so small against her mother's body that she almost disappeared inside the jacket. Or maybe it was the cold itself and the knowledge that no one should be sitting outside in weather like this at midnight with a child that young. "Stop the car," Boris said. Oleg glanced in the rearview mirror. "Boss?" "Stop the car, Oleg." The sedan pulled to the curb. Boris sat still for a moment, watching. The woman hadn't noticed them. Her head was bowed over the child, and she was rocking slightly, the way mothers do when they are trying to keep their children warm, through nothing but motion and prayer. Boris opened the door and stepped into the cold. Anya heard the footsteps before she saw him. Her head snapped up and her arms tightened around Lena with the speed of someone who had learned to flinch before the blow landed. Her eyes went wide. The man walking toward her was a stranger, and in Anya's world, strangers were never safe, especially men, especially at night. Boris stopped 6 feet away. He didn't come closer. He kept his hands visible at his sides. He looked at the woman's face, the split lip, the bruise forming under her eye, and something shifted behind his expression. It was subtle. If you didn't know what to look for, you wouldn't have seen it. But it was there. A tightening of the jaw, a flicker of something cold and old and personal. "Are you waiting for a bus?" he asked. His voice was calm, low, the kind of voice that was used to being listened to. without needing to raise itself. Anya shook her head. Then she looked down, as if eye contact itself was a form of vulnerability she couldn't afford. "Please," she said. "We are fine. Please go." Boris looked at the child. Lena was staring at him from over the collar of her mother's jacket. Her eyes were enormous and unblinking. She didn't look scared of him exactly. She looked like she was trying to figure out what kind of danger he was. "It's below freezing," Boris said, quietly. "You'll both get hypothermia out here." "We're fine," Anya repeated, though her voice cracked on the second word. Boris was silent for a moment. Then he took one step back, not forward, back, and crouched down so that he was at eye level with the little girl. "What's your name?" he asked her. Lena looked at him for a long time. Then she said very quietly, "Lena." "Hello, Lena. My name is Boris. Are you cold?" Lena nodded. "Is your mama cold too?" Another nod. Boris looked at Anya. "There's an all-night diner 2 blocks from here. I'd like to buy you and your daughter something warm to eat. That's all. You can sit at your own table. I'll sit at the counter. You don't have to talk to me. But I can't leave a child outside in this." Anya's eyes filled with tears, not because of his kindness, though there was that, but because his kindness made her realize how long it had been since anyone had spoken to her without anger in their voice. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. She simply stood up, still holding Lena, and followed him at a distance as he walked toward the car. When he opened the rear door, she hesitated. "The diner is close," Boris said. "But you'll freeze walking. I'll have my driver take us. I'll sit in the front." He moved to the passenger seat without waiting for an answer. Anya looked at the empty back seat. It was warm inside. She could feel the heat spilling out of the open door. Lena shivered against her. She got in. The diner was called Penny's, and it smelled like burnt coffee and bacon grease and the kind of fluorescent warmth that only exists in places that never close. There were 3 other customers, a cab driver reading a newspaper, a woman in hospital scrubs staring at her phone, and an old man asleep in a corner booth with his hands wrapped around an empty mug. Boris ordered coffee for himself and sat at the counter, his back to the room. He did not look at Anya. He had told her she wouldn't have to talk to him, and he meant it. Anya and Lena sat in a booth near the window. A waitress brought them menus. Lena stared at the laminated pictures of pancakes and scrambled eggs with the focused intensity of a child who hadn't eaten since lunch. Anya ordered 2 hot chocolates and a plate of toast. She counted the money in her plastic bag under the table. $38 and change after what she had already spent. The hot chocolate came in thick ceramic mugs. Lena wrapped both hands around hers and pressed her face close to the steam, and for the first time in hours, she smiled. It was a small, fragile thing, that smile. But it was real. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. The warmth of the diner was doing what warmth does. It was pulling the armor off. Anya's hands stopped shaking, her breathing slowed, and eventually she looked across the room at the man sitting alone at the counter and realized that he hadn't turned around once. He hadn't watched them. He hadn't intruded. He had simply made sure they were warm, and then he had let them be. She picked up Lena and walked to the counter. Boris looked up. "Thank you," Anya said. "For this. You didn't have to." Boris nodded. "You don't have to tell me anything, but if you need a place to stay tonight, I know people who run a shelter on the west side. It's clean, safe, they have beds for children." Anya's chin trembled. I can't go to a shelter. My husband will look for me. He knows the shelters. He told me once that if I ever tried to leave, he would find me. He said he would." She stopped. She looked at Lena. She couldn't finish the sentence in front of her daughter. Boris studied her face for a long time. Then he said something that surprised her. "Where are you from?" "Ukraine," she said. "Chernivtsi, a small city." "I know Chernivtsi," Boris said. His accent which she hadn't noticed before, suddenly made sense. The way he shaped certain consonants, the rhythm of his speech. My mother was from Odessa. Anya stared at him. You're Ukrainian? Half. My father was American. But I grew up speaking Russian and Ukrainian before I spoke English. He paused. How long has he been hurting you? Anya opened her mouth. Then she closed it. Then she opened it again, and this time the words came out not in the careful, edited English she had trained herself to speak in public, but in the raw, unguarded Ukrainian she hadn't used in years. She told him everything. She told him about the visa, about the courthouse wedding, about the 8 good weeks and the 3 terrible years. She told him about the isolation, the confiscated phone, the way Craig had hidden her passport and her green card application in a safe she didn't have the combination to. She told him that Craig had told her if she ever called the police, he would report her as an illegal immigrant and have her deported, and that she would never see Lena again, because Lena was an American citizen, and the courts would give custody to the father. She told him about the night she lay awake while Lena slept, staring at the ceiling, wondering if dying would be easier than staying, but knowing she couldn't leave her daughter behind. She told him about tonight, the plate, the door frame, the way Craig had turned his fury toward Lena for the first time. She told him all of this in Ukrainian, in a diner in South Chicago at 1 in the morning, while her daughter ate animal crackers from a box and drew pictures on a napkin with a borrowed pen. At one point, the waitress came by and refilled Boris's coffee. She looked at Anya's face, the bruise, the split lip, and then she looked at Boris, and something in her expression hardened. Boris saw it. He didn't explain. It wasn't his story to tell, and it wasn't the waitress's business to hear. But he understood the assumption, and he filed it away. The way he filed away everything. Silently, permanently, without comment. Anya talked. For almost 40 minutes. She hadn't spoken this much in years. Craig had trained her to be quiet, to answer in short sentences, to never volunteer information that could be used against her. But now, in the warm light of this diner, speaking in the language she had been born into, the words poured out of her like water breaking through a dam. She hadn't even realized she had been holding. She told him about the day she had tried to leave before. Almost 2 years ago, she had packed a bag then too. She had taken Lena to the park and kept walking past the playground, past the parking lot, all the way to the bus station on Ashland. She had $30 and a phone number for a domestic violence hotline she had memorized from a flyer in a bathroom stall at the public library. She had dialed the number. A woman had answered. The woman had asked Anya if she was in a safe place, and Anya had hung up because the word safe had suddenly seemed like a concept from a foreign language. Not Ukrainian, not English, but something she had once spoken fluently and had since forgotten entirely. She had gone home. Craig hadn't even known she was gone. That was perhaps the worst part, that her absence was so unremarkable to him that he hadn't noticed it. She told Boris about the way Lena had started wetting the bed 6 months ago, after a night when Craig had thrown a glass against the wall and the sound had woken her up screaming. She told him about the parent-teacher conference where Lena's preschool teacher had gently asked if everything was okay at home, and Anya had smiled and said yes, everything was fine because the alternative, telling the truth, felt like stepping off the edge of a cliff with no guarantee that there was anything below to catch her. Boris listened without interrupting. His face did not change expression. His coffee grew cold. He didn't touch it. He simply sat and listened with the complete, undivided attention of a man who understood that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for another person is to hear them without trying to fix them. When she was finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke, also in Ukrainian. He lied to you about all of it. VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, protects you. You can file for immigration relief independently. He cannot have you deported for leaving him, and no court in this country will give custody of a child to a man who beats her mother. Anya's eyes went wide. How do you know this? Because I've seen it before. Because I have lawyers who handle exactly this kind of case. He paused. Your husband is wrong about something else too. What? He told you no one would help you. He was wrong. In the silence that followed, Lena looked up from her napkin drawing and studied Boris with the same careful, unflinching gaze she had given him at the bus stop. Then she held up the napkin. She had drawn 3 stick figures standing together under a triangle that was probably meant to be a roof. That's you, she said, pointing to the tallest figure. That's Mama. That's me. We're inside where it's warm. Boris looked at the drawing for a moment. Then he reached into his coat, produced a phone, and made a single call. 20 minutes later, a woman named Galina arrived at the diner. She was in her 50s, heavy-set, with kind eyes and an efficiency of movement that suggested she had done this many times before. She drove a gray minivan and spoke to Anya in Russian. She told Anya that she ran a private safe house, not a city shelter, but a residence funded by private donors that did not appear in any public directory. No names were recorded at intake. There were 2 beds available. There was a lock on the door. Anya looked at Boris. Why are you doing this? Boris was quiet for a moment. Because someone should have done it sooner. He didn't say more, but there was something in the way he said it, a weight, a specificity. That made Anya understand this was not abstract compassion. This was personal. Something had happened to him, or to someone he loved, and whatever it was had left a scar that looked a lot like the one she was carrying tonight. She didn't ask. She simply nodded, picked up Lena, and followed Galina out of the diner. Boris watched them go. Then he finished his coffee, left $100 bill on the counter, and walked back to the car. Oleg was still behind the wheel. We missed the meeting, boss. I know. Goran won't be happy. Goran owes me $600,000. He can wait. The car pulled away from the curb. Boris sat in the back seat and stared out the window at the snow. He didn't speak again for the rest of the drive. 3 days passed. Anya and Lena stayed in Galina's safe house, which was a second-floor apartment in a quiet residential block on the west side. It had 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a living room with a television that Lena watched cartoons on, while Anya tried to figure out what to do next. There was another woman staying there as well, a young woman named Priya from Indianapolis, who didn't talk much, but who always made sure to leave the bathroom clean after she used it, and who once left a chocolate bar on Lena's pillow without saying anything about it. The first night in the safe house, Anya couldn't sleep, not because of the unfamiliar bed, or the street noise or the clicking of the radiator. She couldn't sleep because the apartment was too quiet. There was no one in the next room whose breathing she needed to monitor, whose footsteps she needed to track, whose shifting weight on a mattress spring might mean the difference between a peaceful night and a violent one. The silence should have been a relief. Instead, it was disorienting, like a soldier home from war who can't sleep without the sound of engines. Lena, however, slept deeply for the first time in months. She curled up in the small, twin bed with a stuffed bear that Galina had produced from a closet, and she slept for 11 hours straight, without waking once, without a nightmare, without calling out for her mother. When she woke up, she looked around the unfamiliar room and said, very quietly, "Is this our new house?" "For now," Anya said. "I like it," Lena said. "It's quiet here." That sentence, 4 words spoken by a 5-year-old, broke something open inside Anya's chest that she hadn't known was still intact. Because what kind of life had her daughter been living if the thing she noticed first about a new place was the absence of noise? What kind of childhood had it been if silence was a novelty? On the second day, Galina sat with Anya at the kitchen table while Lena played in the other room. Galina didn't push, she didn't interrogate. She simply made tea and set a plate of cookies on the table and said, "When you're ready to talk about what comes next, I'm here." "There's no deadline?" Anya asked, the question she had been turning over in her mind since the diner. "Who is he, the man who brought us here?" Galina was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He's someone who helps people when no one else will. That's all you need to know." "Is he dangerous?" Galina looked at her with an expression that was equal parts honesty and compassion. "To you? No, never. To people who hurt people like you? She paused. He can be. Anya nodded slowly. She had suspected something like this. The car. The driver. The way Boris moved through the world with a specific kind of confidence that comes not from arrogance but from power. Real, quiet, structural power. The kind that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to. She should have been frightened. She wasn't, and she understood, with a clarity that surprised her, that the reason she wasn't frightened was because she had been living with a genuinely dangerous man for 3 years, and she had developed an instinct for the difference between a man who used his power to control people and a man who used his power to protect them. Craig's strength was a cage, Boris's strength was a wall, and she and Lena were on the safe side of it. On the third morning, Galina told Anya that a lawyer wanted to speak with her. The lawyer's name was Catherine Whitfield. She arrived that afternoon in a navy blue suit with a briefcase and a calm, methodical way of speaking that made Anya feel like she was finally talking to someone who understood how the system worked and wasn't afraid of it. Catherine explained everything. She explained VAWA, self-petitioning. She explained the U visa process for victims of domestic violence. She explained emergency protective orders and how to file for sole custody. She told Anya that Craig's threats about deportation were not only lies, but were themselves a form of abuse recognized by federal immigration law. She told Anya that everything when the green card, the custody, the protection was possible. It would take time. It would require documentation, but it was possible. Anya cried through most of the meeting, not from sadness, from the sudden, overwhelming realization that the cage she had been living in had a door, and the door had been unlocked the entire time, and she simply hadn't known. Catherine's services were being provided pro bono. When Anya asked who was paying for it, Catherine said only that her firm occasionally took on cases through a private referral network. She did not mention Boris by name. She didn't need to. On the fourth day, Craig Belmore went looking for his wife. He started at the obvious places: the bus station, the few acquaintances Anya had once been allowed to have, the Ukrainian church on Western Avenue where she used to go before he forbid it. He drove around the neighborhood slow and methodical, his jaw tight and his hands gripping the steering wheel the way he gripped everything, like he owned it. By the fifth day, he was getting desperate. He called Anya's dead phone 18 times. He drove past the local police station and thought about filing a missing persons report, but something stopped him. The knowledge, buried beneath his rage, that if the police started asking questions about how his wife had gotten that split lip, the conversation would not go well for him. On the sixth day, Craig found himself at a bar on Archer Avenue, telling a friend named Dale about how his wife had run off with his kid and how he was going to drag her back by her hair when he found her. Dale, who had his own complicated relationship with the law, mentioned that he knew a guy who could track down anyone in the city for the right price. By the seventh day, Craig had a name and an address, not Galina's safe house. That was invisible to his kind of search, but he had the name of the diner where Anya had last been seen, and from the diner he got a description of the car that had taken her, and from the car he got a partial plate number, and from the plate number he got a neighborhood. He showed up at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. He parked his truck 2 blocks away and walked. He was drunk, but not sloppy. Functioning. The kind of drunk that Craig did best, just enough to silence whatever was left of his conscience, not enough to slow his hands. He found the building. He didn't know which apartment, but he stood on the sidewalk and began shouting Anya's name. Upstairs, Lena heard him first. She had been watching a cartoon about a rabbit family, and she froze. Her body went rigid. Her eyes went to the window. She knew that voice the way animals know the sound of a predator, not through understanding, but through instinct, hardwired by repetition. "Mama," she whispered. Anya was already moving. She had heard him too. The sound of Craig's voice hit her like a physical blow, and every cell in her body switched to the same mode it had been in for 3 years. Survival. She pulled Lena away from the window. She turned off the lights. She locked the bedroom door, even though it was just a hollow core interior door that wouldn't stop a grown man for more than 5 seconds. See, her hands were shaking. Her breath came in short, ragged bursts, but she did not cry. She had trained herself out of crying during emergencies because crying took energy and focus and time, and in the moments when Craig was at his worst, she needed all three for something more important. Making sure Lena wasn't in the room when it happened, Lena pressed her face into Anya's stomach. "He found us," she whispered. "I know, baby, I know, but we're safe here. The door is locked." "The door at home was locked too," Lena said, and the logic of it, the terrible, perfect 5-year-old logic, left Anya with nothing to say. Downstairs, Craig's shouting grew louder. He was calling Anya's name, then Lena's. His voice had that particular quality it took on when he had been drinking, thick, confident, a voice that believed it had a right to everything it was demanding. Priya appeared in the hallway in her pajamas, eyes wide. Galina put a hand on Priya's arm and shook her head. "Stay calm, stay inside." Galina was on the phone before Craig had finished his second shout. She didn't call the police, she called a different number. Boris answered on the first ring. "He's here," Galina said. 12 minutes later, 3 vehicles pulled up to the block in quick succession. A black SUV, a dark sedan, and a silver Audi. No sirens, no flashing lights, just the quiet precision of men who knew how to arrive somewhere without announcing themselves and without asking permission. Boris stepped out of the sedan. He was dressed the way he always was. Dark coat, dark clothes, the kind of understated authority that didn't need a badge or a title. Behind him, 4 men spread out along the sidewalk. They were large, calm, and positioned in a way that was not threatening to anyone who wasn't causing trouble but was unmistakably final to anyone who was. Craig was still shouting when he saw them. He turned, and the alcohol in his system made it take a second longer than it should have for him to process what he was seeing. 4 men who looked like they had been carved from the same block of stone, and 1 man in the center who didn't look like anything at all, who looked, in fact, like the quietest person on the entire street, but who radiated something that Craig's lizard brain recognized before his conscious mind caught up. Danger. Real danger. The kind that doesn't shout. "Who the hell are you?" Craig said. Boris walked toward him with the same measured pace he used for everything. He stopped 4 feet away, close enough to be heard in a whisper, close enough for Craig to see that the gray eyes watching him contained absolutely no fear and absolutely no hesitation and absolutely no interest in a conversation that lasted longer than it needed to. "My name isn't important," Boris said. "What's important is that you're standing outside a building where a woman and a child are trying to sleep. And you're going to stop. That's my wife in there. And my kid. I have every right. You have no rights here." Boris's voice didn't change in volume. It didn't change in tone, but something in it shifted. A coldness that entered the space between them like a blade laid flat against skin. "You lost your rights when you put your hands on her. You lost them when you terrorized a 5-year-old. You lost them when you locked away her passport and told her she'd be deported if she asked for help." Craig blinked. "How do you know about—" "I know everything, Craig." Boris let the name sit in the air. "I know where you work. I know what you drive. I know what you owe on your mortgage and who you called 2 days ago to try to track her down. I know about the arrest in Peoria you think was expunged. I know about the workers' comp claim you filed with a fraudulent doctor's note. I know everything there is to know about you, and none of it impresses me." Craig's face had gone pale. The aggression was still there, but it was cracking. Underneath it was something he wasn't used to feeling. The sudden, disorienting experience of being completely outmatched. "You don't scare me," Craig said, but his voice cracked on the last word. Boris didn't respond to that. Instead, he leaned in, close enough that his next words were meant for Craig alone. "Here is what's going to happen. You are going to get in your truck, and you are going to drive home, and you are not going to come back. Tomorrow morning, you're going to receive paperwork from an attorney, an emergency protective order, a petition for sole custody, and a notice that your wife has filed a VAWA self-petition, which means the federal government now has an interest in her well-being. If you violate any of these orders, if you call her, if you text her, if you drive past her, if you so much as mention her name in a bar, you will be arrested. And if somehow the legal system fails, which it sometimes does, then you will have to answer to me. And I promise you, Craig, I am much less forgiving than a judge. Craig stood there for what felt like a very long time. The street was quiet. The snow had stopped falling. The four men on the sidewalk hadn't moved. They didn't need to. Craig turned and walked back to his truck. He didn't run, but he didn't take his time either. He got in. He started the engine. He drove away. He did not come back. The legal process moved with a speed that surprised Catherine Whitfield, though she had seen Boris's influence streamline proceedings before. Within 72 hours, a judge signed an emergency protective order barring Craig from any contact with Anya or Lena. Within 2 weeks, Anya's VAWA self-petition was filed with supporting documentation from Catherine's firm, a domestic violence counselor, and a translated statement from Anya herself that ran 11 pages and detailed every incident she could remember in chronological order. The custody petition was filed simultaneously. Craig retained a lawyer, but his lawyer took one look at the evidence. The medical records from the emergency room visit Anya had made 18 months earlier, which she had never known, were still on file. The police report from a noise complaint a neighbor had made 2 years ago that had been classified as domestic disturbance, no action taken. And the photographs Galina had taken of Anya's injuries the night she arrived at the safe house, and advised Craig to settle. Craig refused at first, then his lawyer told him what the judge was likely to decide based on the evidence, and Craig changed his mind. Anya was granted sole legal and physical custody of Lena. Craig was permitted supervised visitation only, pending completion of a court-ordered anger management program that he had not yet enrolled in. The VAWA petition was approved 4 months later, granting Anya independent immigration status that was no longer tied to her marriage. She was free, not quickly, not easily, not without nightmares and panic attacks, and mornings when she couldn't get out of bed, and evenings when the sound of a door closing too hard made her whole body lock up. Recovery was not a straight line. It was a stuttering, uneven, sometimes backward journey that required a therapist she saw twice a week, and a support group she attended every Thursday, and the slow, painful process of learning to believe that she deserved to be safe. There were setbacks. There was the afternoon in January when Anya was walking home from work and saw a man on the sidewalk who walked like Craig. The same heavy, forward-leaning stride. And she froze in the middle of the crosswalk with her hands pressed to her chest until the light changed and the cars began to honk, and a stranger touched her elbow and asked if she was all right. There was the night Lena woke up screaming because she had dreamed that the old apartment door was opening, and Anya held her until 3 in the morning, singing the same lullaby her own mother had sung in Chernivtsi, a lullaby about stars falling into a river and the river carrying them to the sea. There were victories, too. Small ones that mattered more than anyone who hadn't lived through this would understand. The first time Anya answered a knock at the door without checking the peephole 3 times. The first time she went to the grocery store without mentally rehearsing an explanation for why she was there in case someone asked. The first time she laughed, genuinely laughed, mouth open, head back, at something Lena said at the dinner table. It was a joke about a penguin. Anya couldn't even remember the punchline later, but she remembered the feeling. She remembered what it felt like to laugh without listening for footsteps behind her. But she was free. Galina helped her find an apartment, a small 1-bedroom in a building where the landlord didn't ask too many questions, and the heat worked, and the locks were solid. Anya found a job cleaning offices in a downtown building, which paid $11 an hour and wasn't much, but was hers. Lena started kindergarten at the public school 3 blocks away and came home every afternoon with crayon drawings and stories. about a girl in her class named Sophia who had a guinea pig named Biscuit. They were building something. It was small and fragile and nothing like the life Anya had imagined when she first came to America. But it was real. And it was theirs, and no one was going to take it from them. She saw Boris one more time. It was a Saturday afternoon in March, 4 months after the night at the bus stop. Anya had taken Lena to the park, a proper outing, the kind of ordinary thing that had once been impossible. Lena was on the swings, pumping her legs with the fierce concentration of a child who has recently discovered that she can make herself go higher if she tries hard enough. Anya was sitting on a bench, watching her, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she was not afraid. A black sedan pulled up to the curb. Boris got out. He was alone this time. No driver, no men. He walked to the bench and stood a few feet away, hands in his coat pockets, watching Lena swing. "She looks happy," he said. "She is," Anya said. "She's doing well in school. Her teacher says she's very smart." "I believe it." They stood in silence for a moment. Lena saw Boris from the swing and waved. He waved back. "I got the apartment," Anya said. "And the job. Catherine says the green card should be finalized by summer." Boris nodded. "Good. I want to ask you something." Anya turned to face him. "That night at the diner, when I told you my story, something changed in your face. It wasn't just sympathy. It was something else. Something personal." Boris was quiet for a long time. He watched Lena pump her legs on the swing. Then, he spoke in Ukrainian, the way he had spoken to Anya that first night. "My mother was from Odessa. She came here when she was 22. She married my father because he promised her a good life. He kept that promise for about a year. Then he became a different man. Or maybe he had always been that man, and he simply stopped pretending." Boris paused. "She stayed for 11 years. She stayed because she had no papers. She stayed because she had a son. She stayed because he told her the same things your husband told you, Faposta. That she was nothing. That no one would help her. That she would lose her child if she tried to leave." "What happened to her?" Anya asked softly. "She left, eventually, when I was old enough to understand what was happening and young enough to still be angry about it. A woman at her church helped her. A lawyer helped her. She got out, but the damage was done. The years she lost, the person she might have been, she never got those back." He looked at Anya. "She's alive. She lives in New Jersey now. She has a garden and a cat, and she calls me every Sunday to make sure I'm eating enough. She survived. But I remember what she looked like during those years. I remember the sound of her crying through the wall. I remember the way she flinched." He paused. "When I saw you at that bus stop, holding your daughter, I saw her. I saw my mother 30 years ago. And I decided that this time, someone was going to help before 11 years had passed." Anya felt tears running down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. "Thank you," she said. "For everything. For the lawyer. For Galina. For that night." "You don't owe me anything," Boris said. "You did the hardest part yourself. You walked out the door." Lena had gotten off the swing and was running toward them with the uncoordinated, joyful urgency of a 5-year-old who has spotted someone she recognizes. She skidded to a stop in front of Boris and looked up at him. "Hi," she said. "Hello, Lena." She tilted her head. She was studying him again with those enormous brown eyes, the same way she had studied him at the bus stop, trying to place him in the only categories her 5-year-old mind had available. "Are you a good guy?" she asked. Boris looked at her. Then he looked at Anya. Then he looked back at the little girl who had drawn him into a stick-figure family on a napkin in a diner at 1 in the morning. "I try to be," he said, "for people who need me to be." Lena considered this. Then she nodded, as if this answer satisfied whatever internal tribunal she had been running. She reached up and took his hand, just briefly, just for a moment. And then she turned and ran back toward the swings, her coat flapping open, her laughter rising into the cold spring air like something newly released. Boris watched her go. "She's going to be all, she's, right?" he said. Yes, Anya said. She is. He turned and walked back to his car. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The woman on the bench and the girl on the swing were no longer his responsibility. They never really had been. They had always been each other's. He got in the sedan and pulled away from the curb. The park grew small in the rearview mirror. The spring sun was low and golden, and it hit the windshield in a way that made everything ahead of him look bright and blurred and new. Behind him, Lena swung higher. Anya watched. The wind moved through the bare trees, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang, and the city kept going the way cities always do. Indifferent to miracles, even the small ones. Especially the small ones. But they happened anyway.